Three interrupts. So the summary of my storyline, patrilineal, matrilineal, is quite grotesque. Most recently in the 1890s to about around 1915, three key things. One Frenchman raped my great-grandmother, likely over an attempt to steal claim to land. That's commonly what was going on back then. An Irishman, out of infidelity, out of wedlock, decided to bed a Mohawk န့ΗНGAHAGA from the Haudenosaunee over an Adirondack Lake, birthing my dear grandfather. Likely stealing that baby. She went missing. Most people believe that she was murdered. That's what was shared with me verbally. There's no record of it. It seemed to have happened around Niagara Falls. So, missing and murdered Indigenous people. One baby, one mother. The third grotesque event was an Italian, an alcoholic, transplant straight from Italy around 1890, marries a Comanche woman, properly known as the Numunuu people. My great-great-grandmother Lydia has a baby with her and abandons both at around age 4, when Blas is about age 4. Soon after, she abandoned Blas, and he went to be adopted by her first husband's father, taking a Spanish name, white identity, and hiding out for his entire storyline. Going back a little further, more of the same. 1850s to the 1890s. Three basic stories where we're all hiding out under false white identities. Yes, Spanish people were considered white back then. It was England versus Spain versus France versus the colonists. All deemed themselves white and of higher manifest destiny. So during this time frame, these 40 years, my Apaches hid out under one name. They both my great-great-grandparents went missing, presumed to be murdered. The Comanche story I just offered, her parents went missing in the 40s, presumably due to the common Texas Ranger strife, all the wars that were occurring throughout the early 1800s. I'm sure that they were murdered at some point on the plains. I have a wonderful picture of my great-great-great-grandparents. And then also Cherokees. The Cherokees hid out under a different Spanish name. That is a more involved story. Takes me back to the Trail of Tears, beginning in 1839. They were a part of the second roundup, as I understand it. My great-great-great-grandfather was murdered as part of finding their way to the encampments as part of the Trail of Tears. What more do you have to really live for when your baby is trying to be stolen, presumably as a gift to the white people that were moving in to their farms, to their we don't call it property, into their territory. So amidst the murder of her husband and the theft attempt on her baby, she fled the Trail of Tears, and that's why you see me here today. Pretty grotesque. So that's just a summary statement of my history. And you wonder why I reject all claims, all ties back to the French, the Irishmen, and the Italians. I do, however, honor the Irish woman's heritage and loving energy. My great adopting grandmother, Rose, took in my grandfather and named him Roseman. She is the one that ensured that our lineage would survive all of this strife. A little more info about my matrilineal side. My great-great-great-grandparents, like all Algonquin-speaking people, were pushed off the East Coast, originally from the area known as Maine now. My great-great-grandmother, Namid, which means star dancing, was the last full-blooded child from this part of the lineage, and unfortunately she met up with a Frenchman in the early 1900s. That's the rape that I spoke about in the summary statement at the beginning. He was likely coveting some claim to land that she had back then. This was near Algonquin Provincial Park. Their baby was never officially named on record on the Canadian records. The only reference I could find was young native girl on an unofficial birth certificate, because Namid and this daughter were on the run from day one. And apparently they never found their way into the Canadian or U.S. databases, which is wonderful. If they had, that would have led to certain theft. My dear grandmother, I'm glad that she wasn't stolen away, because she held on to her cultural values and passed that along through my dear mother. My biological grandmother, her spirit name was never shared with me, but only traits, part of her storyline, and her picture. Her drawing was shared with me at around age 7, and that's what you see here. This is my dear grandmother of Ojibwe, Odawa, Algonquin descent. And more detail on my mother's father's side, like I mentioned, an Irishman born in the 1890s found his way to my dear great-grandmother, who was န့ěＮ:gahaga, people of the land of Flint. People of the Iroquois Confederacy is typically what they're known as, otherwise the specific tribe being the Mohawks. She was minimally, who knows whether it was consensual. I presume because that my Irish great-grandfather was part of the man camps. Very common story to this very day. He was out there clearing trees and mining coal as part of the whole New York endeavor. He met up with my Mohawk great-grandmother. Her name was န့ěΝ:ḵાવી, which means carries her footsteps. We believe that they were part of the Heron clan, the Heron family, of the 9 families of the Mohawk. Anyway, their baby, my grandfather, who eventually had the name Roseman. I do not know what his spirit name, his native name would have actually been. The only record I have is his U.S. official rebirth certificate, as he was, again, lovingly claimed, lovingly adopted by Rose Doherty. Rose Doherty was not my biological great-great-grandmother, but she took him on behalf of Minnie. Minnie was the wedded great-grandmother at the time, and that's who the Irishman offered infidelity to. Now, my grandfather, Roseman, he would later get married to a white woman of English descent, no biological relationship. Around 1939, that woman would adopt my mother, who was also born out of wedlock. My grandfather, Roseman, would meet up with